and welcome to August edition of Frankie Sense and More. I'm here today with movie critic Brent Marchant, and I am your host, Frankie Picasso, and we are delighted to talk about some new movies for your viewing pleasure, or not.
Well, that's actually kind of up for debate given the way the summer movie season has played out. It's been kind of disappointing all the way around. And I think in some ways, thankfully, we're coming to the end of that now and, kind of getting ready to put it out of its misery. But there are some good things out there. And, I strongly recommend everything we're going to talk about today is movies that you might want to go see.
Okay.
So we're going to start off with one of the biggest blockbusters of the summer, and that's the film biography Oppenheimer. This is one hell of a movie. It's rather lengthy. It's about 3 hours long and probably could be a little bit shorter, but it does a superb job of exploring the life of Dr. J. Robert Oppenheimer, who developed the atomic bomb. And it's not just about chronicling the events that went into the weapon's creation. It's also about the moral dilemmas that he went through individually in its creation, because he was very torn about what he was making. He knew when he started working on the project that it was something that needed to be done to help try and bring an end to the war and to prevent Nazi Germany from getting hands on this technology. But by the same token, when he understood what kind of damage and death this could possibly cause, he had tremendous pangs of guilt associated with it. Even if you're taking out people who are your foes, can you realistically live with yourself with something like that? So the film takes kind of a dual track in terms of exploring not just the events that led up to this, but also it's a character study examining who this individual was, why he felt the way he did, and how it affected him personally. I mean, in many ways, he was initially hailed as a hero for creating this, but then when he tried to do his part to limit proliferation and arms race considerations, well, what kind of a patriot is he?
Yeah.
And he had to wrestle with that. And he was basically trying to say, look, I'm also a human being. I'm a humanitarian. I believe in using my gifts and tools to make a better life for mankind. And I don't know that this is necessarily something that falls into that category, even though even though it's something that was seen as unnecessary evil in bringing this war to an end.
Yeah.
But he saw the handwriting on the wall very clearly, and he did his best to try and forestall that, but he still got tarred and feathered for having done that. So you get a very complicated story in terms of the way of looking at how this man had to wrestle with these very deep philosophical and scientific considerations.
And it should be difficult. It shouldn't be an easy decision.
It really is. I mean, one of the things that people came away from it saying, well, why did he create this life for himself if he was going to be facing these difficulties? And, that's a good question. But, in the end, I mean, maybe he took on the challenge to raise the subject.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, mankind throughout history had been prone to following these paths of self-annihilation. And maybe the nuclear threat was so great that maybe it would finally scare mankind into not wanting to pursue these kinds of paths anymore. But to do that, the conversation had to be raised.
Yeah.
He was the one who was at the center of it. And as much of a toll as it took on him, it was also a very courageous act on his part to call the question. And this film brings that out very clearly. And that's one of the things I absolutely loved about this. I mean, it's a movie that's been advertised in trailers and marketing for almost a year. And it really lives up to every expectation of it in terms of the way the film was made, the acting, the special effects, the sound, I mean, is just phenomenal in this film. If you end up sitting close to the screen as I did, which I was at a screen that was nearly sold out, you can feel the sound coming off the screen and going through you.
Wow.
And that's really impressive because it makes it not just a visual experience at that point, but a visceral one as well.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
that's really cool. There were some issues with the film in terms of the 70 millimeter size. I think there was issues with the screening of it. Some people had to walk out. They had difficulty with the, I don't know why or what happened, but there was some difficulty, I think, with on the larger on the IMAX screen size in a number of theaters.
probably because it could be perceived as an overwhelming experience. I mean, it really is.
No, with the film itself, like the actual.
Yeah, I know.
film.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
it could be seen as almost a visually and viscerally overwhelming experience that people couldn't handle. I mean,
No, I mean with the actual movie reel, if they were still in reels, let's say, it just couldn't. It wasn't clicking, or it wasn't. There was something had gone wrong in the production, I think.
okay. I hadn't heard that, but yeah, no, I hadn't heard
At first
that.
I heard people were walking out. I go, why are they walking out? And then I go, no, it wasn't because they didn't like the movie. It was because the movie wasn't playing for like the first 10, 15 minutes that it was going on. But so if you had experienced that, they have fixed that. That's all I was trying to regurgitate here. It's done.
It's a film that it's not everybody's cup of tea. I mean, first of all, the length is one thing that puts off a lot of people, 3 hours. But it didn't really drag for me. I mean, it moves along at a pretty decent pace. I think they could have made some cuts in the first hour. I think they could have made some cuts in the final hour, and it wouldn't have really hurt the film.
Yeah.
But the idea here was to present as comprehensive a look at Oppenheimer's life as possible, which to me, that makes the length understandable.
They used to do little intermissions when they got to be that long because, a lot of people need to use a washroom. They don't want to miss a movie. They need a drink. Kids, whatever. You're not going to take a kid to it, but, older people also need to use the washroom more frequently. And it could have been a good idea to do that.
Yeah, that's something that's kind of baffled me in recent years with longer films that don't have intermissions. I mean, you had movies in the past that were shorter than this that had intermissions.
Yes.
And this one is longer and it doesn't get one. So, I mean, I don't quite fully grasp.
Actually, because they want to sell more stuff or they want to get more stuff, like the 3 hours, okay, we're going to go to a noon movie, 3 hours, don't have time for lunch. But maybe you're going to be hungry in those 3 hours.
Well, I mean, I'm sure a lot of theater owners would appreciate the intermission for sales at the concession stand. I mean,
yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
That's where theater owners make most of their money anyways. So, I'm
still surprised that for a 3 hour movie. Come on, guys, get your brains working. All right.
But one of the things that really is outstanding with this film is the casting. I mean, the cast is just superb across the board. Cillian Murphy as Oppenheimer is excellent. Matt Damon as Leslie Groves, the general who was overseeing him. He's fine. And Robert Downey Jr. plays a role in this movie that, I mean, I never knew that this guy could act the way he does in this film. He's already being considered very strongly as an Oscar contender for supporting actor for this part. And I would say very deservedly so. He is so good in this that you completely forget about all of his, superhero movies and things like that when you see him on the screen. It's because
he's got chops. I've always really liked him. I've always liked him a lot.
But. So I really like this film a lot, and I would give it 4.5 out of 5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to.
Okay. So next we're coming to a movie that was, supposed to be one of the summer's big blockbusters, and it's ended up being kind of a bust.
Yeah.
The final film in the Indiana Jones series, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Critics and viewers have been pretty harsh on this, and I think kind of unfairly so in some ways. I think they were expecting that it was going to be yet another Indiana Jones movie in the same style as its predecessors. But that approach would not have been appropriate for this particular story. This is the finale of the series. The character is being retired. He's being put to bed. And because of that, he's going to be going through things in his life that are different from the swashbuckling he did in all the previous installments. And because of that, I think a lot of people were disappointed, saying, well, it's not like the old ones. And, well, his character's old. he's getting ready to retire. He's facing, potentially the end of his life not too far down the road. He's had a lot of disappointments. He's teaching at a less prestigious college. He's in the process of separating from his wife. He's physically not the man he used to be. He's drinking a lot. I mean, there's a lot of things that are really, weighing down on him. But I think when you look at the title of this film, Dial of Destiny, that's the real clue to understanding this picture, and the fact that what kind of destiny does he want to go out on? What kind of legacy does he want to leave? And it's like the old Neil Young song, do you want to fade away or burn out? And that's the choice he's presented with in this film. And I think it was really the appropriate take needed for a story like this, especially given its place within the history of the franchise. Now, with that said, there are some things about it that weren't as well done as some of the other ones. I mean, it's a little long. The story does sag a little bit in the middle. The action sequences, as good as they are, tend to go on a little long. But this is basically good, solid action adventure, summertime filmmaking. And
okay, I'm going to disagree with you.
I just felt that the people have been taking a lot of petty pot shots at it.
Okay, well, I was 15 minutes in and I'm like, do you want to leave? I was so bored. And then, I mean, if it wasn't for the female lead, she made the film. Now, I didn't try to compare it to the first, but thinking about the first Indiana Jones, I thought, okay, well, I was 20, maybe younger, and it was the first of that kind of movie. And so it was really exciting and wow. And then this, we've seen a lot of these tricks. And it was, I guess for me, I really hate when I can tell you exactly what's going to happen in the next scene. And that was pretty formulaic, and you knew what was going to happen in the next scene.
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole series has become somewhat formulaic over the years anyways. I mean, you can only pull the rabbit out of your hat so many times.
Yeah. And like, I have nothing against, the acting but I think the writing could have been a little bit stronger, or scenarios could have been.
Yeah, I agree with you there too.
But we stayed till the end because I was like, oh, it's going to get better. Like, okay. But it was the kind of movie I could have watched it or left it, and it didn't leave an impression on me after I left, where a movie like Oppenheimer would. You know what I'm saying? But
yeah,
to each their own. And that he could do those things, amazing at his age. The beginning was interesting because, when did they film this? They must have filmed this, when did they film that? Because he was young.
No, they did it with CGI.
Is that what they did?
Technology. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's something else that this movie has kind of sort of unfairly come under criticism for, saying, well, making him look younger, that's cheating. Like, how is it cheating? No. I mean, and Harrison Ford came out in defending this basically, and I agree with him, that when you're creating the look of a character on screen, you do the same thing with makeup, prosthetics, costumes, motion capture cinematography, like they did in the Lord of the Rings movies.
Yeah.
What's wrong with using age regression CGI as another tool?
Yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with that. And yeah, he's absolutely right. And it's a character, and that's what the character looked like. And so the character is playing the character. You can't argue with the character.
And what's to say that it's anything against the director from using every tool at his or her disposal to create the look that he or she is going for in creating the image of this particular protagonist.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're so far into the future, and you don't know what's going to happen in the future that they couldn't have possibly filmed that in the past.
Well, and I mean, actually, this is one of the issues that's sort of coming up in connection with the actors' strike right now, is the fact that, well, if we've got this technology available to us, who needs actors? Which that I think is a legitimate argument, but in using it to, it was still him though. It's not like you went and got a new person and made it look like Harrison Ford. Yeah, and using the technology to help create that look, I don't see anything wrong with that whatsoever.
Yeah, no,
And
me neither. Me neither.
so, I'm
Lots of people will like this film. I just wasn't one of them.
well, I mean, there are other films in the franchise I definitely liked better. I mean,
Yeah.
I won't deny that.
Okay.
But I didn't feel that it really deserved to be stepped on as mercilessly
Yeah. Well,
as a
I
lot
don't
of
think so.
people
I mean,
have.
come on, it's a swan
I
song.
mean, I think some people, particularly, and I don't mean to be stereotyping here, but particularly a lot of younger viewers, they're like, oh, well, we've seen this before, and this is like all that really mainstream commercial fare, and like, it's like, oh, stop talking like a hipster, I mean,
Yeah. Well, there's not blood and guts and gore. No, there isn't. You can take
so
a to this movie.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this film is nearing the end of its theatrical run. In fact, in some markets, it's already gone. But if you want to see it on a big screen, do it soon because it probably won't be there a whole lot longer, and it just won't have the same effect on a small screen. So
No, it won't.
that's something that I think is important to bear in mind with it. As for my rating, I give it 3.5 out of 5.
Okay. All right.
Now, on a very dramatic change of pace,
Let's do it.
we have Rock Hudson, All That Heaven Allowed, which is a new documentary that's on HBO and Max streaming service, which provides a very comprehensive look at the life of the Hollywood matinee idol who was big in the 50s and 60s. He, at the time, was, one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. He was the kind of man that
Every girl wanted.
women swooned over, and that every man's man wanted to hang out with because he was such a,
Guy.
kind of guy. And he made a very successful career for himself, but he had something that he was carrying around that he had to be very careful about, and that's the fact that he was gay.
Yeah.
And in those days, that would have torpedoed his career in a heartbeat. So he was very carefully managed and handled to make sure that that part of his life was kept secret and hidden from the public, because it would have ruined him if it had come out. And all the time throughout his life, he never was actually successfully outed. He managed to keep the two worlds separate. Now, by today's standards, some people might look at that and say, isn't that like kind of an, unhealthy compromise? But times were really different in those days. I mean, you had a lot to lose if you came out in terms of
You would have been vilified, totally vilified.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his career would have been over with, and
there would have been a leading lady.
No, exactly.
Anywhere who would have gone near him.
So he managed to stay closeted, and from what this film shows, he actually had a fairly happy personal life. I mean, he had a lot of friends and lived well and enjoyed himself. It's just that he had to keep the two very distinct.
And management made some alliances for him.
Yes. Yeah, and actually his handlers took care of him. I mean, if he needed mail company, they arranged for it. I mean, it wasn't like he was having to fend for himself and
wasn't celibate.
Yeah, exactly. Now, one of the things that was tragic about this story, though, is that he died from AIDS in 1985, and a lot of people were not terribly surprised because there were suspicions beginning to swirl about his life. But people were like, couldn't he have at least come out in the end, which he never did. But the thing is, his illness, as tragic as it was, really helped to raise the profile of this illness and why it deserved greater and wider attention.
Yeah.
It significantly boosted research funding efforts. It was kind of a in-your-face move to the Reagan administration, which didn't want to deal with it, especially when it, appointed blue ribbon panels to study it and didn't even appoint one gay person to be on it. This was the largest segment of the population affected by it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in the end, he did give gifts back to his community, even if they weren't necessarily overt or, in the way that maybe a lot of the activists of the time would have liked to have seen it happen.
You know what?
But
You live your life in a secret for so long, it's really hard to let that.
yeah,
He acted his whole life, really,
yeah,
and to expect him to come out and go, oh yeah, again, guess what? I'm gay.
yeah,
And if he hadn't got AIDS, we would probably never know.
yeah.
Unless it came to he lived long enough into the 90s or whatever, and then he could have told people, when it was a little
Well,
socially acceptable. But even then, I mean, all the leading ladies he kissed and all the people that he was with, like, they would have freaked out. It just would have not been good.
well, actually, a lot of actresses in Hollywood were very supportive of him. I mean, Elizabeth Taylor, for example, was his co-star in Giant and one of his best friends. And she knew full well what his story was. And she was like, hey,
He's
what he
always
does in
been
his
kind
personal
to
life,
the
whatever he does in his personal life is his,
Yeah.
Same thing with Doris Day. I mean, they just kind of like said, what he does off screen, that's his business, not ours.
Yeah.
And they managed to come to his
Doris Day,
support.
she never married either, though, did she?
I,
I think she did.
I
I mean,
honestly
she
have
had
to
her
look that up.
dogs. She had all her dogs. So maybe she was gay. Who knows?
But the one thing I like about this film is that it gives you a very balanced view of both sides of his life.
Yeah.
Sensitive viewers should probably be aware that some of the discussion of some of his personal life activities are somewhat explicit. I mean, there's not a lot of pictures to that effect, but when they get down to talking about things like how shall we put this politely, his endowment. I mean, the movie doesn't really hold a whole lot back on that regard. But it's interesting to see the two different sides of his life and the way the story is told. And it's very interesting also in the fact that the filmmaker here has specifically chosen clips from his movies and TV shows that are sort of tongue-in-cheek references to what his personal life was really like. And that adds sort of a touch of wit and humor to the film as well. Because even though it was widely known throughout Hollywood what his lifestyle was like,
Yeah.
It never came out publicly. So these little things that got included in the movies and the TV shows were sort of a wink to the audience.
Yeah.
So this is a good film. It's a well-made documentary, and it's available for streaming on the Max streaming service and on HBO cable. And I give it 4 out of 5 stars.
Okay.
Okay, so moving along.
Two funny actors.
Sorry.
I said here we have two funny actors.
Yeah, and this is a movie that has been flying under the radar ever since it came out. It came out in April and it's available for streaming now. It's called Somewhere in Queens, and it's the directorial debut of Ray Romano. And I really like this film in the sense that it's sort of like a lot of the kinds of films that they don't make very often much anymore. It's a family comedy, and it's very warm and funny, and it's in particular it reminded me a lot of Moonstruck, the movie from the 80s with Cher.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about life within sort of a traditional Italian American family living in Queens, where the parents, Laurie Metcalf and Ray Romano, have got a son who is a very shy guy, but he's a star on the basketball court and has a shot at getting a basketball scholarship. And they want to try and help him, get this scholarship so he can get his education paid for. But in doing all this, it raises a really interesting question in terms of how willing are you to walk your talk? And that's a theme that runs throughout the film, that, even though you have this proud ethnic family that's like, hey, this is who we are, we're this and we're that and we're everything, but then they actually follow through on it. So it gives you a funny story, but with kind of a serious underpinning to it, in terms of, are your families necessarily everything that they seem to be when it comes to their actions? And this is a sweet and warm and funny, enjoyable little domestic comedy in the style of a lot of other older films that they don't make a lot of anymore. And I really enjoyed it. I was very pleasantly surprised. It's a shame that it hasn't gotten wider play than it has. It was in theaters in April. I think it was there for like maybe a week or two, and then it was gone. Didn't get a lot of fanfare. I didn't get a chance to see it when it first came out. So when it became available for streaming, I finally watched it. And I really enjoyed it. In particular, I really enjoyed the performance of Laurie Metcalf. I mean,
everybody enjoyed her performance.
she was outstanding in this. I mean, when she made the movie Lady Bird a couple of years ago, everybody was raving about her performance in that film. But I think she's like 10 times better in this one.
She's amazing. She's amazing. Yeah, you can go to Apple and grab it from Apple. You can rent it on Apple if you want. If you can't find it anywhere else.
Yeah, no, actually, I think it's on a variety of streaming services right now. I think I watched it on Amazon, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot of places where you can find this out. It's a charming little way to spend some time in front of your TV set with a big bowl of popcorn or a big bowl of pasta, if you want, in this case.
Yeah.
And I'd say go see it. It's I'd give it 3.5 out of 5.
Okay. Well,
and our last new movie this month is a movie that has also kind of flown under the radar. It's called Monica. And this is a domestic drama that deals with the story of a trans woman who was kicked out of her house as a teen and comes home as an adult to help care for her mother, who's dying of a terminal brain tumor.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, the mother has developed memory issues, and she's never met her child as a woman. So how do you introduce yourself under those circumstances? So she comes in and kind of sort of ambiguously poses as a caregiver and tries to get to know or re-know this person who she was raised by, and tries to decide, okay, well, what am I going to do here? Am I going to just, let a grudge hold on, or am I going to attempt to, make amends while I still have the chance? It raises a very interesting moral dilemma in a situation like that. And the film explores it from all different angles in terms of her relationship with her mother, and also reintegrating and developing relationships with other members of her family, mm-hmm. including relatives by marriage who she's never even met.
Yeah.
The pacing is a little bit on the slow side, but I think that's
very slow.
Well, I think that's deliberate, though. I mean,
yeah.
If you were in those circumstances, how willing would you be to jump in with both feet and say, okay, we're going to handle this now?
Yeah, like she's mesmerizing to look at. She's like, there's something very mesmerizing about her, and I mean, you could just stare at her and look at her. But the film was slow and slow to get to the point. It kept backing away from it and going over here a little bit, and then coming back and backing away and coming back. I would have, and the camera angles were a little weird. I don't know. Artsy, yes. Interesting, yes. But I mean, I love Patricia Clarkson. She's like one of my favorite actors. Yeah. And I mean, she does a phenomenal job no matter what she's doing, I think.
Well, one of the other things I liked about this too is that this was not a film that was just about LGBTQ issues.
Yeah.
This was a situation where, dealing with a parent who is dying from a terminal illness is something that lots of folks can relate to, regardless of what their orientation is.
Yes.
But the fact that you have the additional transgender issue thrown in as another wrinkle to this story.
Yeah.
Really helps to distinguish it.
We went to see my husband's mom before she passed away. And she was at a dinner, but she was in her 90s. She didn't recognize him. She hadn't seen him for 30 years, and she didn't know who he was. And she knew his siblings. But he was the last child. He was always kind of ignored anyway growing up. And so when we came in and they're like, "It's Danny, Mom. It's Danny, your little boy Danny. You remember Danny?" And she goes, "No." I mean, that was really hard to hear. That was hard to hear, you know? And then a light bulb went on about an hour later, and you saw a little twinkle in her eye. Oh, I know you know, kind of thing. But it
Yeah,
was,
there's a scene somewhat similar to that in the movie where um, Monica is in the midst of providing some of her caregiving, and all of a sudden you see this look come across her mother's face, like, "I know who you are,"
yeah,
and
yeah,
but she can't bring herself to say anything when she recognizes her. Yeah, it's a question of, at that point, is it something that she's happy about, or is it something that
yeah,
she's shocked about, or you know,
yeah.
you know. So I mean, it raises a lot of interesting little issues. And as I say, this is not the kind of film that you can expect to sit down and have it move by at a brisk, breezy pace. And I think that's intentional. And I think
Yeah, and
that's,
it's not everybody's cup of tea.
yeah,
So, you know, if you're an avid moviegoer and somebody who really likes film,
yes,
you will enjoy it.
yes.
If you are somebody who wants Hollywood, no, you will
No, no, you won't get that from this. No,
not.
absolutely not. Um, So I would, for the avid filmmakers, or I'm sorry, the avid film
Viewer.
fans, I'd give this a thumbs up of, I give it 4 out of 5.
Oh, wow, you're really generous. More than Indiana Jones. I
Oh,
would have done it 2.53. But okay.
so to close things out today, I got 2 quick announcements I wanted to make about other films that are out there. One is about a movie called The Atomic Cafe, which is a hilariously hysterical documentary. It was made back in 1982. It makes a perfect pairing for watching with Oppenheimer. The Atomic Cafe is a film that's primarily made up of newsreel footage and US government propaganda film clips from the 1950s, basically telling how people can prepare for the bomb. And some of the proposals that are raised in this film are so utterly ridiculous. Like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Things will still be there when you come back, and so forth. Um, I think you'll laugh your behind off watching this one, because it really gives you such an incredibly naive look at the way the bomb was treated back
You
in the
know,
day when it was
I
really
remember in the 60s being 6 years old, 7 years old, and my neighbor having a bomb shelter in their home.
yeah,
And I remember going down into it, and they showed me the bomb shelter, and bomb, what's a bomb, right? But homes were built with them.
yeah,
These homes were built with
yeah.
them, you know?
Oh, and I remember the whole air raid drills in school, the duck and cover nonsense, and
Yeah,
make
it's
sure you cover
crazy.
your eyes and in the back of your neck. Oh yeah, like that's gonna make a big difference.
Yeah, yeah. It's almost like reefer madness, but
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a very good analogy. So the thing
yeah.
is, if you're looking for something to lighten the mood after watching Oppenheimer, you might want to throw this one on, because you'll get a lot of chuckles out of it,
Okay.
even despite the fact that it's a very serious subject.
Yeah. All right. And the last
Finally,
piece.
I wanted to remind viewers about a documentary that came out on Showtime about a year ago, Nothing Compares, which is the film telling the life of Sinead O'Connor. Ever since her passing, I've seen this film come up a lot on social media posts, and a lot of people making reference to it, basically saying, if you haven't seen it, watching this would make a good tribute to her, especially if you were a fan of hers. It's a fine film, explores her career, shows how people kind of destroyed her career on her, but that she was also not afraid to speak her mind and say who she was. And that points to the perils of, being ahead of one's time,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of nostalgic to see some of the performances that she gave, and you can really get a sense of just how talented this woman was, and in that regard, how underappreciated she was. So this is available on the Showtime streaming service. Get a chance to see it, give it a look. I think you'll really enjoy it. and it'll tug at the heart, especially in light of what's recently happened.
All right, guys, there you go. August.
Yep.
August is done, and
Yep.
we're in September.
So we're taking a little bit of a late summer vacation. Look for us to come back in September, and we'll be starting to look at some of the first films from this year's award season. It's hard to
Awesome.
believe we're back to award season again already, but usually Labor Day is when those movies start coming out, and they'll be released through the end of the year. So
Be interesting to see
some of what's on
on the
tap.
horizon.